I was working as a college minister during those first moments of the pandemic. Like many churches, we had to quickly pivot online. We had to reinvent some things. I hosted some virtual college Jackbox game nights, and I led a decently successful 40-day reading journey through the Gospels in a Facebook discussion group, which all ended on Easter Sunday. We were all kind of trying to figure things out in those days. The pandemic forced a lot of churches and Christians for the first time ever to think about the internet theologically. So my guest today is Mike Van Gogh. He's written and engaged on theology of the internet, and he's going to be an interesting conversation partner as we wrestle with the World Wide Web and discuss what the internet is and what it's like and how us Christians should engage with it. Welcome to Theology Meets World, hosted by me, Jake Doberenz. This podcast delves into the heart of real-life issues with theologians, ministers, activists, and writers who share their unique stories and insights. Keep up with the show at jakedoberenz.com/TMW and subscribe to updates and weekly funny newsletters at jakedoberenz.substack.com. Don't forget to rate and review the show and share it with your friends and your enemies. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. I'm glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, no, it's this is one of the first ones I've been invited to. I've had the chance to interview a lot of people, but yeah, this was kind of fun to get be on the other side for once.
Yeah. As we were talking before the show, you're the first Canadian on Theology Meets World, so that is an honor. So we'll keep going forward.
Sweet.
Well, awesome. Let's just kind of jump in. And, you've written some books on the internet theology. Well, actually, you've written books on a variety of subjects, and you've engaged with these topics. So I really wanted to have you on, and I'm honored, I guess, to be the first one to interview you in this podcast format. And and Mike, you started thinking and writing, though, about doing online ministry before it was cool. And by cool, I mean, before a global pandemic forced a lot of churches to think about doing stuff online, aka the once upon a time world of 2019. So back in 2019, why did you publish a book on online ministry?
So it actually started quite a bit before 2019. I think the first kind of inklings of the book were probably back in 2017. And honestly, I've had the idea for a while. It probably landed in some blog posts that might not be up on my site anymore. But I saw it as a missing kind of mission field for the church. I saw it as a huge opportunity that was just being kind of like passed over by the church because of traditional methods. Like you'd probably hear a lot of online pastors or people in this kind of space talk about online ministry nowadays. So I was right along with them for a lot of cases, especially with like a lot of the more popular books out there. I kind of wrote my stuff ahead of theirs, not even knowing about these guys. And then book just kind of sat. It did decent numbers for a bit, and then just kind of waited for it to kind of come of age and see if people would start talking about it. And then, COVID hit, and we got to test out every part of my book, which I thought was going to be this awesome kind of like, yeah, let's go. I was finally right. And what better chance to prove it than, like a worldwide pandemic? I was trying to be optimistic. But, it didn't go that way. The second we got to start trying some of this stuff out, and I got to start seeing how it would play out in my own church. It really started to go sideways, and I realized that there was a lot of short-sightedness in the book, and a lot of kind of assumptions that I had only made because I was making it from an internet user who was also a Christian's perspective, as opposed to the kind of reverse of that. And so about about halfway through 2020, I took the book down because I realized that what I was advocating in the book, because I could see it being used, even though I wasn't really like called like to consult or anything like that on any kind of church policy or whatnot. But I could see that my ideas were being used because it was the natural reaction of people in the pandemic. And I actually took the book down and started a rewrite because I realized that I got a bunch of stuff wrong. And the last couple of years have really just been God working on me, trying to figure out like the deeper theological issues and problems for what we just assumed was pragmatic use of the internet for ministry. So.
I really appreciate your humility in that story. I appreciate that you're willing to recognize, oh, wait, I got some things wrong. And I mean, goodness, like a lot of things happened during that whole period of time that just nobody saw coming. You know, we were not exactly as a church super united on many things, and just a lot of, what a wild time to test, right?
Yep.
Those theories and things. And but I appreciate again that humility, kind of going back, and we'll kind of engage maybe in some of the ways your thinking has changed as we go on, and kind of where you're at currently. But yeah, I appreciate you having the foresight, I suppose, for thinking about that even before it was trendy, even before it seems like, every pastor has a TikTok or something now, and we'll go into whether that's pastoring or not, but it's ubiquitous, right? I mean, now, however, we can't just jump into something new without thinking through it theologically, and I hope we can do that today.
Totally.
And we're a practical show, and so with things trial and error, we'll figure out what's kind of the best way forward.
Sure.
So I want to start off broad. That's what I like to do on the show. And then we kind of work our way down to earth, like I like to say. So let's talk about the internet. Huge, very unfair question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Like, is the internet itself good? Is it bad? Is it neutral? What is this?
So you'll hear that kind of trichotomy a lot, that any given technology, specifically the internet, it's not good, it's not bad, it's not neutral. And what I've noticed with that is like, oh, that means that the person is stuck. They don't know how to classify it, because they know if they classify it one way, they have to deal with the consequences of the other too, and stuff like that. And so my general response, which is kind of sideways to that, is it's sinful. And people are like, oh, it's evil. Like, no, it's sinful. That's different. I look at the internet as an inherently broken thing that could have been a good thing had sin not been in the world. And that comes from an understanding and kind of following of Marshall McLuhan, another Canadian, and his kind of philosophy of technology and new media, which treats technology as an extension of mankind. And so where I see that as an extension of mankind, a lot of people want to deal with kind of like how that plays out with certain aspects of mankind, but they never want to deal with the extension of mankind that has to deal specifically with, our faith relationships, or like our sinfulness, our piety, that kind of thing. So being a Reformed guy, I'm already of the type to think of myself as a sinner first, then saved by grace. I just applied that to the internet and all technology, really. It's like if you start thinking about technology as sinful, the way a human being is sinful, but abstracted away from the human being, like technology abstracts any given technique away from a human being, well, then you have a different kind of relationship to technology. It can't just be a good thing. You can't look at something as complicated as the internet without that schema and decide, is it good or is it bad? Because you end up with, you end up piling up all the good stuff and piling them all the bad stuff and sorting through all the gray stuff. And it's just one big mess. And that's closer to the concept of like karmic debt than anything resembling Christian theology. It's like we don't weigh good against evil. Our understanding of good and against evil is that, there was good creation, it was corrupted by sin, and that corruption needed a death to encompass it, and then to point towards a new life along with a resurrection for redemption. And so there's no real practical way to look at the internet that way. If we were to look at it just, by the numbers, it's not a good thing. I mean, 30% of the internet or more is just pornography. That's just like a rough count on, pornographic websites. And so if you had 30% of your body was cancer, you are not good. You're in a bad spot. And so looking at it from that lens, it's like there's no way to kind of compensate. There's no way to do enough good on the internet to compensate for the bad. We get into these weird kind of Catholic penance situations or karmic debt. And really, I just applied good old-fashioned Reformed theology to it and said, okay, what if it's like Marshall McLuhan says, an extension of us, and that extension is part of our sinfulness that extends it out. So yeah, that's a complicated answer, but yeah, it's none. It's sinful. It's something different.
Well, I love that answer. I think sometimes we're too optimistic or too pessimistic, but you're just being realistic. Like, just, this is what it is. Like, I suppose maybe when, you take the minerals out of the ground to become the microprocessors, maybe there's an element there where we can be neutral at the beginning, but humans mess with it too much, well, it's going to be, used for all sorts of things across the spectrum. Absolutely. So I think that's a very helpful way, and that's kind of where I've fallen on technology. And also big Marshall McLuhan fan myself. I was a communication studies minor in college. Oh, yeah. So I got to deal with him. My favorite Canadian philosopher, probably. Yeah. Probably
I'm actually friends.
one,
I don't want to name drop, but just so people know this guy exists. I'm actually friends with his grandson on Twitter. And so we trade stuff all the time, and he is just an absolute mensch. He's hilarious. Like, he's always tweeting out like wordplay stuff. Very insightful. He's doing a great work at really trying to capture and memorialize his grandfather's work and part of his father's work too, because he did the same kind of thing. And really just kind of like build a legacy around what Marshall was up to. It's real fascinating stuff. He's got a podcast too. I think it's called the McLuhan Institute. But his name's Andrew McLuhan, and it's just awesome. I met him sometime last year. We've been shooting stuff back and forth every now and then, replying to each other's stuff. And yeah, he's awesome. And that he brings so much of his granddad kind of back from, the kind of 60s to 90s into popular discourse is so important, especially on a platform like Twitter. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And my goodness, has technology changed since then? But a lot of those theories hold up, just applied differently. I think I encountered some of McLuhan's stuff through like Neil Postman's work. But then it's funny because Neil Postman's talking about the TV and, all this stuff. Whoa. It's like, man, we are way past TV. Like, I wish that was as bad as it gets.
I wonder sometimes how they, because they got so much right. And it's like, we're like, just to sit them down, like, okay, there's this thing called TikTok. And just watch
brains would explode. Yeah, no, totally. Really, though. Oh, goodness. So let's kind of add Christian to the whole thing. I mean, maybe it's that Christian inclination. We want to baptize everything we see. And I mean, Christians have been early adopters in technology for millennia. I always tell people that, hey, one of the whole book thing was not maybe a Christian invention. Right. It was popularized by Christians. And then, then we fast forward, we got printing press and the radio. Every new technology, Christians are on it. So now Christians are on the internet, but what dangers might come up with Christians trying to navigate this? Now we want to be Christian on this sinful thing. Yeah. Well, what happens?
Totally. So what God's kind of brought me through with the rewrite of the book, which I'm just about done, has been trying to source that out. Like, okay, but how then do we as Christians approach the internet? And then kind of what are the aspects of ministry that you can and can't do? And so when we're talking about Christians using the internet as as something to kind of maximize what their effective ministry is going to be, you have to go to the Bible first and then you have to understand what it's asking of you compared to what technology is asking of you. This is one of the biggest things that I kind of rail against when it comes to like the online church, is that we were given the appearance of church through like the online means, like streaming or Zoom church, all that kind of stuff. And that satisfied enough of our kind of like desires to let us put down the rest of the theological requirements. That we had an image where even now, like you and me talking, we're deciding that this is a space that, we're in a space that we can, talk in. That space is, Riverside, that kind of thing, that we're able to, like, both of us gather at that space and have this conversation. But that's not actually what's going on. And that doesn't track with how the scriptures interpret and explain reality to us. The two things I like to point people to, two statements that Christ make about worship or concerning worship. One is with the woman at the well. He says that people will worship in spirit and truth, that they're not going to worship in Jerusalem, they're not going to worship on this mountain, that they're going to worship in spirit and truth, that there's no longer going to be like a singular locus of worship, but it's going to be worshipers worshiping in spirit and truth. And then we pair that with what else he says about worship in a context, at least, where he talks about where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am also. And those two things, if all we do is hold on to those two instructions from Christ, we basically can't reconcile online church with it. Because are we worshiping in spirit and truth? Well, not if we're trying to also gather together, because we're not gathered together. I'm in Edmonton. Like that's the difference that we're seeing. Like, so, and the internet, while it connects us, also separates us because it is the thing between us. And we saw and kind of compensated for a lot of that during the pandemic, and then just kind of wrote it off with the whole, it's extenuating circumstance. It's unprecedented times. But really, we left the theology in the dust, and like, this is how Jesus taught us and told us how to, like, bare minimum, lowest bar to entry for a church, just get together and do it in the spirit of truth. And instead, we started calling things places that weren't places. We started doing things, the pre-recording services that a lot of churches did ahead of time just to make it so that it worked for them. That again, is like people were assuming they were going to church, and they weren't. They were going to a pre-recording, which you can't do, but you can consume a pre-recording. And that kind of stuff, that spirit and truth versus, actually gathering, all that kind of stuff, the 2 or 3 are gathered. That's the lowest bar of entry that Christ gives us for what we would consider church or Christian fellowship. And we just kind of put that aside because we were able to accomplish something that looked like church. So it's really important to go to the scriptures and, like, how does this describe the functions of Christian church, the functions of Christian life in all aspects, and then try to see where that fits into the internet. And then where it doesn't, don't try and force it. Don't try and make it explain it away because you're in charge of the internet because it's not mentioned in the Bible. And that's the next kind of thing that a lot of Christians do. They said, oh, well, they don't mention the technology in the scriptures. That's up for us to try to interpret it with our hermeneutical methods. It's like, well, actually, it's the other way around.
No, that's fair. I think that's a good reminder. And I did see a lot of people, just because of the frantic stuff. Like I said, I was in ministry during that time. We just got to figure things out, and we didn't realize that, we should have actually, we should have thought about technology more ahead of time. I mean, Google is just a tad older than me. Like, my whole life has been around, and
you're gonna make me feel old. Don't do that.
Well,
I'm so much older than Google, man. Oh man.
Well, I can't say I'm older than Google. Google still beats me by, I think, a year. I'll have to look up when they started again, but yeah. But yeah, I'm over here in Oklahoma City, far away, and we do get to have a form of relationship of something here. But talk to me more about this idea of this is not a place. I mean, just dive into that real fast for my own understanding.
So I'm fond of saying all over. I almost said it there. I almost said X instead of Twitter. Oh, they're breaking me down.
They are. for sure.
I'm fond of saying on Twitter that the internet is a thing, not a place. And it goes off my understanding from scripture and stuff like that. But it demonstrates itself that too. The idea that what we've decided to exchange as an aesthetic equivalency, this idea that, as long as we can see something that's representational of what we want, a room where you and I can talk to each other, where I don't have to leave my room on this side of the room and you don't have to leave your room on that side of the room. But it then becomes one room because of the internet. That kind of stuff, I understand that looks that way, and I understand why it'd be easy to make an assumption that since it looks that way and it seems to function that way, that we can just kind of import how Christianity works and then do it in a digital setting. But that's actually not what is happening when we do this, communication online like this. What you're seeing isn't me, and we're not together. What you're seeing is actually different languages translated into pixels, and then what I'm doing is being translated through a camera to be able to do that, and it's happening at the same time at different speeds. But even your audience, they're going to be able to see. There's been a few times during this call where we've had lag, where you're going to be able to see that there's like a miscommunication. There's no lag in real life. And that's not that, that communication is made invalid by that lag, but it does betray that whole, are we in the same place together while we're kind of like expressing the truth? Are we saying true things, and doing true things? Well, if we're saying that we're in the same place and we're not, that lends itself to drift where you can say one thing and mean another. And that's really that whole kind of pressure is like we've made so many assumptions with the online environments that have been made available to the church, and how they kind of interact with church life that not only did not need them, but has never needed them up until this point. And now we're saying, well, you can't not have like a church online because that's the best way to reach everyone, who's in your area, because you can do SEO and all that kind of stuff. It's like, actually, no, like you can just have a church, that kind of stuff. But like the idea that if you treat it as it is, not how it presents itself to be, because we are instructed in the scriptures to let our yes be yes and our no be no, and to be forthright with how we kind of assess things. And right now we're saying that this is fine, that 720p kind of grainy in the background, it's just the same as real life. But it's not the same as real life. There's, all sorts of things that can be, that can happen with this that take away from what would be an entirely different kind of conversation and the kind of relationship that's person to person.
It's giving me a lot to think about, I think, because that's a new perspective that I don't know that I have spent a considerable time really wrestling and thinking about. But I do want to say, I do think my brain lags sometimes in real life too, though.
Man, I turned 40. I'm right there with you, man. There's sometimes
I don't know.
Where are my leftovers in the fridge?
Right. And maybe even sometimes there's like a dial-up sound kind of going on in my head, and I don't know. But your point stands. Your point stands, right? And I guess kind of continuing on this theme, I know that you've been pretty critical on the social media formerly known as Twitter. We'll call it that. You've been critical about this idea of online discipleship. So now I want to kind of move to discipleship specifically.
Sure.
Can you disciple somebody online? Is there a right way or wrong way to do that? Like, what do you mean by this? You can't have online discipleship.
So my original comments that I kind of made on Twitter were kind of sparked by the idea, and you'll see a lot of pastors, kind of talking heads in the Christian kind of spaces talk about this. All seem to kind of pop up, honestly, when Andrew Tate got popular, which I'm still trying to figure out how he got popular. Like, the guy's weird. But he presented an attractive version of what he would call masculinity to the world through a massive social media content management, like kind of campaign, I guess is what you would call it. And you heard a lot of pastors say the same thing, like it was a script. That, that young men, especially in the church, young men in youth groups or like young adults or that kind of stuff, They're being discipled by people online. And that always kind of bugged me. I call it my theological spidey sense. There's things that they bug me and I don't know why, but it's like it's just rattling around in my head like a BB waiting for, something to happen. And then all of a sudden it clicks. And I realized that like the reason why they're saying that it's discipling them is because they're not discipling those kids. They're not discipling those young adults. They're not discipling anyone. And what they would wish for a fruit of discipleship, so like congruent moral living or congruent understanding about social issues, that kind of stuff, the things that you would get out of a disciplic relationship, they're getting opposition to that basically achieved through content. So the content isn't discipling anyone. The content is informing people, but the discipling isn't happening on the backside. And because it's not happening, and there's no results there to kind of like gauge whether or not the discipling is going good, the pastor sees negative results and then assesses that, oh, that's the discipleship, when really that's just information being transferred. And so I think you can use the internet in a disciplic relationship in order to add information into that relationship so that you can both grow as Christians, or as a group you can grow as Christians, that kind of stuff. But it's almost like two bodies orbiting each other. You have the teacher sending a student off, like, go watch these 9 sermons from this pastor that I like, and tell me what you think on the end. And he sends them off into the content, and he comes back in an orbit to the group to be discipled and to like deconstruct what's been introduced to the relationship. Whereas like Andrew Tate just sends stuff out. He just sends stuff out because he needs engagement. He needs likes. He's not in a relationship with the millions of people that are, following him. He's using content to kind of parasocially harvest that attention from him. So my comments there were like, it's not that discipleship can't happen, but discipleship is a relationship. They share that suffix for a reason. And I think I'm using that right. They share that for a reason because it is a relationship. It's supposed to be two people kind of together doing it, working out their faith. It's supposed to be iron sharpening iron, and you can have communication online, but the communication is almost never mistaken for discipleship. It's the content that delivers the most like high octane information to the person who's looking for the information. That's what's mistaken for discipleship, when really it's the fact that no discipleship's happening that's the problem and leading to the situation. And actually, I think that's our fault as Christians. I think we started that because we were the first to try, being as old as I am, like pre-internet, we're the first to have put moral teachings in the form of long-form content online. We beat TED Talk by about a year, doing like online sermons or sermons available online in multiple different formats. And then we also did the multi-site model of church plants, where you have like one pastor at a central site whose content was then distributed to other campuses, either in like hard physical media like DVDs. That's how they like originally started doing it. They would do a service, record it quick, and then send it out to the other campuses so that they could play that DVD right away. And then the internet just streamlined that, like technology happens. Well, we're the ones who decided that piece of content can assume the role of a pastor with a group of people that's not even in the same room as their pastor. And we get back into the whole problems of the internet being a place, or the internet being viewed as a place, not a thing. Because then the pastor, who, when he's abstracted into the piece of content, the DVD or the video file, he's now a thing too. So he's not doing the discipleship anymore. His content's just informing, and you lose that relationship where you can't, go up to the pastor at the end of the service, and if you disagree with him, tell him, like that kind of stuff. We expanded to a point with the multi-site model because technology allowed us to, that got us into this idea that you can disciple with content. And it's just kind of gone from there. Like, I mean, Right Now Media is a great example. That's all that is. That is an entire business model built around the idea that you can disciple with content. Now, thankfully, a lot of churches use that in in a context where you have like a groups pastor who's using that content and then disseminating in a group. And I think that's healthy. I think that's good, and we should totally be
I've done
doing
that myself. I've taught that. Yeah.
But what you have is this concern from pastors who are worried about all the different things you can find on the internet. And it's like, well, yeah, like you need to be involved. The only way to stop that is to not compete with content. It's to compete with context and say, no, let's get together here. And then you can bring back an Andrew Tate video and we can discuss how it's like a skewed view on masculinity or sexuality or anything like that. You can bring information into that context and I can send you out to get information. But absent of that, it's not discipleship. And we are called to be disciples. So like, we don't want you just learning stuff on your own. You want to be learning it in community with people who have the Holy Spirit to teach, so that the Holy Spirit in you can convict, and the Holy Spirit can be the center of how the learning or the growth happens, as opposed to just, whatever content is trending.
Yes to all of that, to a lot of that. And I'm glad you went to the multi-site thing, because that popped into my head, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to ask you about it because that might step on some toes. But let's step on some toes. Why don't we? We're not a real place. It's just a thing anyway. Just kidding.
Exactly.
No, I appreciate a lot about that perspective, especially in thinking about the people I have known. I think about one kid from my youth group who was very, very, very smart, knew a lot of the apologetic answers, and after high school, I learned that he left the faith, and what he said was it was YouTube comments that made me leave the faith, which is wild. It wasn't even a YouTube video, it was the comments, which the comment section is a terrible place.
Remember, one of the biggest lies on the internet is that arguing with people on the internet doesn't accomplish anything. It's like, that is a bunch of bull. The amount of people who have changed their life because of stuff that happens on the internet, it's raw communication. It is powerful, and it can be a destructive force.
But I think I was super into like apologetics, and I was the really nerdy, young youth group kid, and that produced a lot of bad fruits of the spirit, which is a whole other conversation. Unintentionally, I should say, produced that. Yeah. But it resonates, right? It makes sense that if it's all about content, then you just get some really good content on the other side. You go to that side. But if we're not discipling people, if we're not making sure we're working on hearts and minds and souls and bodies.
And you said it. It's like, if you don't get good content on this side, you can go to the other side. That's scripture. That's scripture right there. People will follow teachers with itching ears, desiring honey, to be poured in their ears because they seek teachers after their own hearts. That's right. Scripture. We're told that's going to happen, and then when it started happening, we found ourselves in this kind of weird spot. It's like, yeah, but we really like being able to, get a viral post out. We really like being able to have this kind of reach. It's like, yeah. And this is the cost of it, is the ecosystem of that kind of biblical, unfaithfulness to the community of God.
Wow, absolutely. I think as we start to wind down, I want you to kind of cast a positive vision for us in a relationship with technology, specifically the internet. We talked about earlier when I said, like, you didn't choose the optimistic or the pessimistic route. You just choose the realistic one. So I'm hoping you can kind of offer us a little bit of hope here, somewhere between, become Amish and reject all technology, and then the other side being like a Silicon Valley tech bro.
Well, so I haven't published the blog post yet, but I have one on the Amish coming up, because if you strip away all the Anabaptisms, oh gosh, is the Amish not the perfect group pastor's vision of what the church can be? You're telling me there's people who are community focused and really into the Bible, and they really like getting together and doing projects together. They'll a whole barn in a weekend, that kind of stuff. Like, there's all these things about the Amish that are like colloquial to them. And it's like, if you took the Anabaptist theology out of that and handed that to like anyone in the megachurch, who like, this is the best thing ever. And it's like, yeah, the only thing is you can't YouTube it.
You're right.
That's it. But there's a place for technology. I I think it comes from a deeper understanding of the scriptures. I had a really good talk with a member from our church. He's into cybersecurity. He's been doing it forever. I think he's retiring soon, but he's been doing it forever, and he helps the seniors at our church once a year just kind of figure out email, figure out, like how to do all these things, how to stay safe, how to avoid scams, all that kind of stuff. Real kind of blessing to our church, especially with an older congregation. And he said it always comes back to like the scriptures and Jesus. And so like with the idea that technology is sinful, how are we then seeking redemption with fear and trembling like we are in our own lives with our redemption or with our technology, with our internet? I think back to books like John Piper's Don't Waste Your Life. That kind of stuff, that was talking about the same kinds of things. Like there's so many people whose entire hobby is just mindlessly scrolling TikTok. But you can build community with TikTok. You can build into that, so that everyone's kind of like getting something out of it that's not just raw entertainment. A lot of people are surprised when, I talk to them about it, that like my family, like my oldest son, my wife and I, we all have TikTok accounts. But what we don't do is we don't use the internet for what it's designed for. We use it for what it can accomplish. We use it with that pragmatic end, knowing that we need to be careful with it because it can be dangerous. And so we use it as a family building tool. My feed is all, like baby ducks and goats and cute babies and home stuff for my wife, and football jokes and, like other stuff for my son. And vice versa with them too. And then anytime you pop out your phone and you're bored and you're scrolling through TikTok, you're not entertaining yourself. You're looking for things that you can bring to the family that night. We have a big sectional couch and everyone piles on it, and we just laugh our butts off right before bed as we're all showing each other the cute ducks and stuff like that and spending that time as a family. It completely subverts what TikTok wants to do. TikTok just wants you doing this. It just wants you scrolling once you've gone through 1,000 TikToks before the end of your session or your battery to die. It wants you to just kind of do that. And it sends us searching for the kind of heartstrings of our family so that we can tie them closer together. And that's the kind of approach you need to make with all things, especially technology. And for Christians, it really is using tech, especially the internet, for what it can be used for, not what it's designed for. And we really missed that during the pandemic because we started using things exactly how they were meant to be used. We started doing live streams because live streams were an easy way to do live streams, as opposed to deciding as like, how are we going to, use the live streams in order to do Christianity in a more orthodox way? A great example of that would be like we had a real opportunity to have a house church explosion during the pandemic. And instead of having that house church explosion, we turned every couch in the country into a megachurch seat, where it's just black room, single focus screen, sensory deprivation. Now we're, in church. And we had the opportunity to turn every house into a church where they have a sermon content, but they can get their neighbors in and be kind of a smaller community that's using the content, but doing the community as possible. And it really is using the internet and using technology for what it can be used for, not what it's supposed to be used for.
Yeah, that is a good vision to cast for us, most definitely. Boy, I mean, the more I engage with thinking about the church and what I want out of life, it does come back to the community. And I would love, even now, it's not too late, church, we can do a house church explosion if you want. Like, let's do it.
We proved concept. We proved it'll work. We proved that it all works, and now we just have to do it without government mandates.
Right, exactly. So. Yeah, I've been participating off and on with a local house church here, and it's super cool. They are Anabaptist, so I don't know how you feel about that, but
I'm married to a Mennonite. It's fine. It's fine.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, no, we're cool. We're cool. They got me early with these cottage cheese stuffed pierogies. Fried in bacon fat. Oh my goodness. It's
interesting.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Well, that's really one day you'll have to explain to me why half this church is Canadian Mennonites that have now come down here. I don't. There seems to be something in Canada
They
with all the
do that. They
Mennonites. I don't
move in
know.
large groups. It's their whole
Yeah,
thing, man. Like just
I don't know. I don't know. Um, Mike, it's been awesome having you today. Um, we mentioned your book a couple times. I don't know if you want to tell people to go get it
so
online as it is in heaven,
I'll let people
or
know, and I have a standing kind of agreement with the current numbers that I can kind of support. And it tells you in the description of the book that this book is under revision, and that I've come to major theological disagreements with sections of the book. So I'm hoping to have it out before Christmas, so that people can get a copy if they want. And I'll probably do kind of like an ebook, PDF, EPUB, something like that,
yeah.
uh, free trade in, that if people get in contact saying, hey, I bought your book before and you've changed it and it wasn't a new edition just for the sake of new edition, it was you disagreeing with the book. So I'd like to get the new version because I would have bought the new version if you wrote it. I've got decent numbers and tracking on kind of how many that would be, and I could kind of support it. So if people buy the new book now, or they buy the book now, they're getting the old version. When it finally gets into hard edits, I'll take it off the thing off Amazon and whatnot, so that I can kind of ramp up to a launch of the second version. But if you want to see like the kind of difference in thoughts in kind of a rough draft form, I actually read each of the chapters on my YouTube channel, and then the
Hmm.
tag end of each one of those videos for like a minute or so, 2 minutes, depending on the chapter, is me saying what I got right, saying what I got wrong, kind of explaining how that's changed. And that was kind of like the rough notes of what I've gone through to actually rewrite the book.
Perfect. We'll toss those links in the show notes. But before we let you go, we have a final question that we give all our guests. So let's see what you come up with us for today. Before we end, leave the audience with just one practical action they can do right now to live their faith fully for Jesus. What
Sure.
challenge do you offer our listeners to put into practice this week?
So the biggest thing that I've noticed, and it seems dumb, and it just seems like so counterintuitive and whatnot. But as like I'm living a Christian life, and I know I'm being constantly distracted by these things. You know, like the phone in your pocket's constantly distracting you, and I've got logos on there, and I've got the Bible app, and I've got all sorts of ways to engage with Christian content. But it still ends up being a distraction at times where I know I'm just on the phone and I wouldn't normally. You can go into your accessibility options. I hope this works. And you can see all my kind of apps and stuff, and you can turn it all to grayscale with a
Grayscale,
click
yeah.
of a button. That magic of turning off your limbic brain, because now it's not flashy colors and it's not daylight blue and it's all that kind of stuff. Turning it to grayscale has been revolutionary in my life, and I recommend it to everyone, especially Christians, because we spend so much time on these things compared to time in prayer, time in the scriptures themselves. Even if the scriptures are on our phones, we spend
Mm-hmm.
so much time on our phones, and finding a way to kind of just pull us back a little bit. And that grayscale, it doesn't stop the phone from working, doesn't stop notifications when you need notifications. You can turn it off the second you need to look at a video and stuff like that. But that momentary grayscale, being able to shut down the addictive features of your phone, has been just life-changing for me. I've really adopted over the last year. I think I did a tweet about it a while ago. But yeah, it's fantastic. I recommend anyone who has a smartphone to install Grayscale. It's part of the accessibility options on the Samsung platform, and it just makes it so that you don't want to pick it up almost. It's you only go to it when you need the functionality of this, as opposed to the social conditioning that comes with the phone.
I love that. What a good action. That's very simple that we can all do to help kind of retrain, rewire our brains and focus on Jesus a little bit more and people, real world people and things that really matter in our lives. So excellent. Well, we had a great talk today. We got Marshall McLuhan in there. We talked about discipleship and how that should be, and the difference between, kind of online education versus discipleship. Boy, we hit some good stuff in there, and even talked about Amish, Mennonites, Anabaptists too. So we hit that demographic and Reformed. So look at that. We're so ecumenical. But anyway, awesome. Mike, thank you so much for being on. We will put all those links and fun stuff in the show notes so everybody else can check them out. Mike Van Gogh, it is not how you would think it's spelled, not the same way as the painter, but it's VAN space GOCH. But you can find out more about him and follow his stuff, and I'm looking forward to the book relaunch, and definitely let me know how I can help with that and be a part of that.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted.
Sweet.
It's been a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. For everybody else, you know the drill by now. If you've ever listened to a podcast, rate, review, share with your best friend, your enemy, whatever. Let's get other
church
people.
Directory. Just share with everyone.
I love that, actually. That should be our new call to action. We just open that church directory and just go down everybody's phone number, landlines. I don't care. We'll just tell them all about it. Every single thing. So perfect. Excellent. Well, that's all from, that's it with Theology Meets World, and we'll be with you next time.
Awesome. Thanks.